I want to ask them, and we have city council members, Oliver Jenkins, Michael Corbin, Jeff Everson with us. They are term limited, so they have a few weeks left to go on their terms. You're about to vote on a budget, the city budget, that I'm very concerned about the low reserves that you're leaving the city in. I think it's under 2%, maybe even less than that. Is that where we're going to be? And is that a critical issue for you?
Well, Michael, do you want to take it, or I'm happy?
Yeah, I don't mind starting with this. I think that's a concern that we've had with the past few budgets, is how do we get our reserves up to $12–14 million? And I think the challenge comes back into revenue coming into the city has been very consistent. I mean, there's been a little uptick in sales tax and things like that, but the cost of doing business continues to climb. You know, insurance cost, retirement mandates, and things like that. So
and not just climb, but exponentially increase.
I don't think the medical part alone and the retirement are, they're punitive.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the challenge for the next council, the next administration, is how do we have a sustainable budget? How do we keep up with basic city services? How do we support fire and police in the proper way, in a way that's sustainable?
That sounds like new taxes.
Or new people. Or jobs.
Or a realignment of personnel.
Okay.
I mean,
Oliver,
it could be a
repeat
number of
that,
things.
please.
Or less services. I mean, let's say this, from a pure revenue standpoint, we have about a 5% bump in sales tax, which is net about 3% to our total operating revenues from the general fund. So in any case, we have more than we had. The problem is everything we're doing is getting more and more expensive, as Jeff points out. And, you know, if you got to mow 8,000 abandoned lots in this city, and if it grows in Shreveport, I mean, it grows a lot. So
now,
we just have a lot to manage, take care of. And somebody needs to really, maybe I'd say, right size what we think are the core responsibilities of the city.
It's an interesting point that you just brought up about the abandoned properties across the city. Even with the first Cross Point development was being suggested by the mayor, then there's the second, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff. And the state wants the big building for the office, and then there's retail space and living space. And I'm thinking, hang on, guys. Everything you want is 600 yards away. It's called downtown. Is on one hand, to weigh those two against each other, the jobs of new construction, but we've got all this empty stuff. What did you think about all that? What do you think about that pertaining to how Oliver just framed it?
Well, it's in my district, and I got to say, it was surprising to me how kind of few conversations I had with some of the people involved in some of the various iterations of that. You know, not to say that I wasn't invited to some conversations, but not that many, considering what a big idea it is. I think that right now it's really in the hands of a group that's being promoted as a private sector kind of thing. If they can raise their private capital and they can do it privately, then you know, that'll be interesting to see, and there's no reason to stand in their way. But at the same time, I do think we should pay attention to and remember those studies that we paid a lot of money for back when I had just moved back to Shreveport, and I remember reading them, and they had a lot of advice like fix the bad before you add, you know, fix the, like we have these, like the Belt and Daniels study and all these studies that were back in the early 2000s, you know, but what they were saying is Shreveport, you keep growing outwards, you keep moving to suburbs or neighboring cities or whatever, but you're leaving behind areas that you're, you know, I use in campaigning, I would always try to explain it to people by saying, if your kitchen has a leaky faucet and an outdated countertop and it's looking ugly, you don't build a new kitchen in your backyard and extend the hallway down to it, do you? You remodel your kitchen. But we've been building new kitchens in our backyard for decades.
Let me ask you guys this, because this has come up in the mayor's race a lot, particularly from the incumbent mayor, talking about, you know, she was left with a lot of things that were not done from previous bond issues. And I'll bring up Knight Street. Knight Street improvements were passed 10 years ago. It's not done. They haven't even barely started. Did the previous administration drag their feet on getting some of those projects done? And do you, as a council who were there at the time, take any blame for that?
I'm going to let Oliver talk about Knight Street because that's been a thorn in his side for a while.
Yeah.
But I don't see anything positive coming out of spending 4 years saying we inherited this, we inherited this. The day that you walk in, you put your hand on the Bible and you say, I'll take care of the city, and you sit at your desk. It doesn't matter if you inherited good things, bad things. It's on your watch, and you have to fix it and make it better and move forward. The next council, the next mayor, or if Mayor Tyler's back in, she's going to have to continue to repair things. There are a lot of frustrations with how slow some bond projects moved, and I'm going to let Oliver talk about Knight Street and maybe Ackard Street.
Please.
Okay, well, just, kind of stickler on dollars and time, so it would be 7 years ago.
Okay, my bad.
And I will say that the big argument about doing this big bond project was, for some of us, hey, my concern about doing this big project, do we have the capacity internal in the city to manage $175 million worth of projects? And ultimately, do we have enough contractors that can do it? And then, if you remember correctly, there was a whole discussion about doing $70 million of streets on top of the $170 million.
And this was during Cedric's.
This was during Cedric's regime. So, my point, all that is, we are not really, our capacity to do projects, there was never really, in my mind, an opportunity to get all of those bond projects done in the one term. And nobody really thought it would happen. That being said, the pace at which the ones that got done and when we actually drew down capital to do projects that we really still were 3 or 4 years away with, very frustrating, maybe not as prudent it was in terms of financial management if it should have been. And then one thing that we don't do a great job is kind of a 3-year forward plan of, hey, if we're going to do Knight Street, let's start this year before we even have the contract bid to make sure those utility guys can start their 1 year prepping of the street and road, so that then when we go out for the project, we can actually start on it and then not have to contact the SWEPCO or a Centerpoint. So that's frustration, certainly with Ackard and Knight Street, are that once we got ready to initiate the project, we had to wait another year for utilities before we could even initiate it. And that's, I'm going to say, poor long-term or mid-term planning.
Whose fault is that?
Well, you would probably say in some part the city engineering office, but that's an office where the person who'd been running it for some time retired in the last few years, and then his replacement passed away in office. So, there are some the guy that's in there now is a younger guy, got a lot of energy. I think he's really brought some new energy to that office, and, hopefully that's a good solution to this.
Time for one more question, and let's go down the line from start at Jeff to Michael and to Oliver. Looking back on 8 years city council, what is there one specific incident or moment that you can think of where you went, yeah, I'm glad I did this?
Oh God. I mean, anytime I get to talk to the people I represent, I went to a really wide variety of events the other day, and just a lot of different groups, all of whom were felt so comfortable talking to me. I guess that's what makes me feel good about doing it, is that I represent a lot of different people in my district, and the fact that they may look differently or have different interests or experiences than me, but they feel comfortable telling me about what they care about and what they want to see happen. That makes me feel really good about having done it.
Mike?
Yeah, I think this time of year, especially the end of the year, is when a lot of the homeowners associations in my district have their annual meetings, and I'm invited to speak and visit with them. And that really does give you more one-on-one time than any other way. Because few people come to city council meeting to talk. But having that one-on-one, in a neighborhood setting and listening to their concerns, and a lot of it is just providing information back to them. That is always a feel-good moment.
For me, of course, as everybody knows, I'm a little bit of a wonk on some of this stuff. I think, and so the part that I think really, when we first came into office, the bond and the bond debt, frankly, was extremely poorly managed, assessed, over-milled. We were collecting taxes and I'm not saying anybody was doing anything wrong. It's just we had a millage that generated a certain amount of revenue, and nobody realized that we didn't quite need all of that revenue to pay our.
They may not have been doing it right, though.
They may not have been doing it right.
as right as could have been.
As right as could have been. So my point is, if you ask me, I think what we have done in that area is just dramatic improvement to the long-term financial health of this.
Let me throw one more thing out there. Do we have the water department right now? Is everything going to be fixed in that whole mess?
Listen, they're going through so many changes over there, and I hear that kind of frustration from citizens daily, and well-deserved. But, you know, I have to say that had this city placed the emphasis on our infrastructure maintenance over the last 50 years that we have in the last 5 years, we wouldn't be in this situation today. We have not had the practice as a constituency telling our representatives. We have not had the practice as the water office itself because we hadn't done it in so long. These type of repairs are not cheap. They're not easy. They're disruptive. They're not particularly satisfying when they're completed, but they're needed. And so they're at least working in the right direction. They're going to make some mistakes, but I'll take a step backwards as long as there's 2 steps forward and we're making some kind of progress there. I see them taking progress. We got a new water billing system that's already being adopted right now. That's not to say there's not major problems that are frustrating over there, but as long as they're learning from them and improving, I'm hopeful.
I'll add one thing. If your model is to manually expect a human being to look at 60,000 water meters a month, and that's where you're going to get your data, that's probably not 20th century model of efficiency, not to mention 21st.